Thank you very much. It was an eloquent talk and nice reception. But regarding the middle class,
Right.
before 90s, in early 80s, it was part of the middle class to take their, better half to the five-star hotels.
Right.
Because they used to get marriage at a very early stage. This is my assumption.
Sure.
And because they wanted the better half to, have a look around for the five-star.
Sure. Sure.
And after 92, when the salaries became, exorbitantly high, so the middle class could not move. And the riches, now when you come from middle class to the riches, so there is a big gap. If you are working in multinational, you are still a middle class.
Sure.
But
Yes.
if you own a multinational, then you are a richer people.
Right.
And when you are from middle class to the richer, or you can call it the richest, I find very difficult to cope with my sons if they are, if they own the multinational companies. Because when they talk, they say, you are talking of values of middle class, Papa, just hold on. We are not there. No, there is a very big, you have talked nicely about the high values of the middle class. And we are all, together because of the middle class values, which are being taught by grandfathers and grandmothers and mothers and, a joint family. But we tell them to hold it because you can hold the family together. Otherwise, you can have divorces, as you were saying. And then, if you begin to talk like the rich class, then it's difficult to find the partners by the girl side also, and because then the girl is also equivalent in all respect, and she can also choose in the best possible manner. And then it becomes difficult for both the partners, and then you have a living relationship.
Right.
So I didn't find any of the connection in that. So how could you explain?
Shravan,
Okay.
I'm just wondering, how does religion feature in the decisions of sex and romance? Because marriage,
Yeah.
most of us know, and
Yeah.
it's like you have a different story.
Yeah.
Because we are living in the time of love, jihad and stuff,
Right.
which certainly. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
Religion only in practices of
Not so much spouse selection,
yeah,
actually.
no, yeah,
But when people talk
Intimacy.
about romance and sexual part.
sexual part. Okay. Yeah.
I recalled and now you can consider this for future results maybe, if you do decide ever do a comparative study. So London is also a city where there are a lot of Indians, both migrants from earlier generations and the present generation. They are somewhat similar to the people. You've talked to them. Some, at least, the newer, the younger 20s.
Okay. So the question of so I do think that what you've talked about tying together these aspects, they form a larger part of spouse selection. That is exactly what my PhD thesis was on. This was simply a part of that, but so I couldn't really tie all of that together because it was too much and too difficult for me to bring it together with this aspect. But I would like to comment on the aspect that you talked about, the 90s and 80s, they would take them to five-star hotels. The difference here is, and what I've tried to tell with this talk, is that in the 1980s, the middle class of the 90s and 80s would take their better half to a five-star as a special occasion. But
Occasionally.
yeah.
Once in a month.
Okay, that's still, that's not every day. That's not the everydayness of romance. So what I'm saying is that in this particular segment that I interviewed, it was an everyday, not every day, every second day aspect to, for example, go and have a coffee which costs about 400, 500 rupees. I mean, that's not something that, I mean, from once a month you've come to the everydayness of romance and understanding romance only through the tropes of that, or traveling in expensive cars. I mean, all the boys, I don't know about your sons, but most of the guys that I interviewed, the first payment they make is on the car and not on the house, right? So why car? You don't want to experience the romance in the metro and the public transport. You want to experience romance in the car, and the car is slightly more cheaper to get than a house. So this is the kind of everydayness that I'm alluding to. Everydayness of romance takes a different dimension for this particular segment of the population. Religion featuring in sexual practices, very, very good question. It does play an interesting role, but they are able to overcome it. So, for example, some of my interviewees mentioned, well, I mean, I tried, I didn't want to control the religious background, so it did happen that I had a few who were Christians, and I remember this one guy who came from Kerala. For 2 or 3 hours, we were sitting in a coffee shop for the interview. He talked about loving a particular his girlfriend, the then girlfriend, and saying that no sex, but only after 3 hours. And he said to me, okay, I feel a little guilty now because I've told you so much, but I've lied to you about something. And I said, okay, what is it? He said, I've actually had sex with my girlfriend. I was like, okay, that's fine. And then he said, please keep this to yourself because only 3 people know about this. I'm like, all right. He's like, I know it, my girlfriend, and my God. And he had to really sort of, convince, not his priest, no. He had to really talk about it, convince himself and his girlfriend that this act is fine because we're in love. So that was this another trope that I haven't talked about here. But premarital sex for many, at least the first time, is permissible insofar as it occurs when you're in love. And one night stand immediately becomes the negative. However, with time that also transforms. So it's not that they stick to these ideals. Yes, and I hope to conduct comparative. I really do.
So my question is, so middle class must have been a lower middle class and a poor at some point of time, and then you said that most of the people in your sample started dating in school and then moved to undergrad, postgrad, MSc and things like that. So their space of romance must have been transformed from school space to undergrad, chola kulcha wala, postgrad, and to restaurants and things like that. So when your middle class says that the people who do romance in parks are not decent space, are they saying that we never did that in our undergrad or school days, or what do you think?
No, that's a good question. I would say that it's difficult. The problem with ethnographic research is difficult to establish the veracity of any claim. So they can come and they can tell me whatever they want. Now, how do I know what they did previously? The impression that I got was that those who claimed to be Delhi at least did never do it. And so not all the middle class that I'm referring to is from the so-called lower middle class, right? So I mean, this is a transformative process. This is what I tried to explain in the second half of the talk. So in this transformative process then, those who probably would have experienced intimacy in parks no longer do it because it's not considered to be something that the middle class would do. So this is all self-presentation to me. I don't know the veracity of any of it, to be honest.
So I don't know if it's okay to ask this, since you didn't really talk about it in your presentation, but it came up in the question and answer session, in the whole question of marriage and parental consent being seen as an essential value. And you highlighted this question of inter-community and inter-caste marriages. So I was just wondering if you could briefly talk about it in terms of what were the negotiations involved and, was it a inter-caste in terms of say a Brahmin or a Kshatriya kind of a caste distinction, or a far more?
Sure.
I just wanted to make 2 comments or observations. First thing is that I believe that I have observed that all these parks, Buddha Jayanti Park, Kalindi, Kunj, they are being frequented by people looking for love and intimacy, because even the monuments, and they have been monopolized to a great extent by these kind of people who come from maybe outside Delhi, and they are looking for secluded spots to I mean, so they have been monopolized, and there is a whole economy which is booming because of such, and even the people monuments and the parks and gardens, people managing them, and they know about it, and there is a whole economy which is flourishing. And secondly, I wanted to say that whether it is a sex survey or whether you are interviewing the people, how do you know that people are telling the truth? They hide. So all these studies or surveys or whatever study, it will never be authentic, because how do you know that I am telling you the truth? Because I have to hide. These things are very much personal space. You are intruding into personal space. So that is the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Or even give more
No, yeah, to present yourself as being
if you just come up with the thing and use the right
glamorous.
sorry.
Sorry if I missed it. I just want to understand what's the ultimate objective of your research or PhD?
To get a PhD.
Yeah, so what's the objective of your PhD? That's right.
Good job.
The topic of no, in terms of how it's going to help society. That's maybe if your aim is like you said, like reduce the divorce rate. So that could be one.
Unfortunately, I don't
that
have
could be
the
one of the
power.
impacts. Not just of your PhD. Maybe there will be multiple PhDs to uncover the complete details of relationships, how they are forming and all. But what will be the impact on society? What you are aiming for?
Yes.
I can absolutely agree with what the gentleman said, because these people have desecrated monuments and have vandalized monuments since independence, and they have left the signs there, so you can't really say it's a new phenomenon.
I never said it's a new phenomenon.
Yeah,
But
I mean, absolutely, that's what I'm saying. You never said it was a new phenomenon. He interpreted it.
on the whole monument hill was story, just struck by that
Yeah.
clarify.
Yeah.
When you say non-Delhi, you essentially mean a resident of Delhi who's coming from somewhere.
Sure. Yeah.
But there is also this other group which is sort of a temporary visitor to Delhi, largely to, in Meerut or in Ghaziabad, you don't really have these kinds of public spaces.
Sure.
But you can come into Qutub Minar and sort of do that.
Sure.
And so did that group, which seems to be referred to in some sense, come up in the conversation as a
Okay.
this thing?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll come to your question slightly later, because it's all right. So let's begin with this question on monument. It definitely did. I mean, the groups that occupy monuments and parks, who are not residents of Delhi, who are migrants, definitely was invoked very many times in conversations, perhaps with not as much nuance in terms of, okay, there are two categories of non-Delhi, the ones who have culturized themselves to being Delhi and the ones who have not. But anybody occupying this space was seen as the outsider, and therefore not appreciated in very many ways. Right, so that was, I quite didn't understand the point. I didn't quite get the motivation of this question in terms of the fact that you said that it's been occupied, there's a local economy around these.
Yeah, it is just an observation.
Oh, yeah, sure,
Because
okay,
actually
sure.
You do not get the privacy either in your office.
That's a very good point.
Or residence, so they
Absolutely.
have to go to such places.
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
they are so
This
many
entire
outside
book
Delhi.
is about that. It's a fantastic book. I really enjoyed reading it because this is interesting, and this is juxtaposed to the people that I'm interviewing who do find space. And interestingly, the new space are the OU rooms.
These parks and
So you
monuments-
hire a room for 2,000 rupees and they're in good areas, clean rooms. They're not the seedy hotels. So OYO rooms become something that my interviewees would be occupying. So I absolutely agree with you. Yes, they don't find spaces, and that's why they And this is really the lament of Ravish Kumar in this book, which is fantastically written. Secondly, I don't know whether they've told me the truth or not. And I mean, I'm sure that they have also exaggerated the number of sexual encounters or reduced them to probably be more pious and more, I don't know what, more constrained and more domesticated. There is no way that I can find out if what is being said to me is the truth, if I can use that word. But I suppose the whole idea and the project of understanding the middle class is also in engaging their self-presentations, because that is crucial. That defines their moral selves, that defines their beings. I mean, this is what we have, and this is what we actually should be more interested in, because what they present themselves to be is quite crucial for us to understand what they think they want to be. So,
as you said that you gave the example of a gentleman, the two persons in the relationship and the God. So it is true of for everybody, and all the respondents maybe, because it is a secretive thing, and I mean,
probably,
you want to say what you want to be or what you want to pretend to be.
Sure.
So, and secondly, about the monuments and parks, actually this is limited to Delhi, because you anywhere else in India you will not find so much of parks and monuments where you can do such a such activity, PDA or whatever.
Right.
Thank you.
Impact on society. I'm sorry, I don't know what my research will impact. I don't know if it will impact anything. I don't know if it will have any impact on this room. But as academics, we just, I suppose, research, write, and hope that something can be done out of it. I don't know. I don't consider myself as powerful to be able to stop people from divorcing or encourage them from divorcing if they are in horrible relationships, which, by the way, should also happen. Coming to the question, okay, so I'll try and condense my PhD of 80,000 words in probably a few words. Intercaste marriages, how are they negotiated? Primary ideal of negotiation is what the values of middle class would be, that is of education. Innumerable cases where people belonged from different cultural, community backgrounds, caste backgrounds as well. They waited out by obtaining higher and higher degrees. For example, you would have a love affair when you're in college, undergraduate degree, both are in multinational companies, but that's not enough. Both then go on to do MBAs from the best institutions, and then the parents finally agree, okay, fine, this is all right. However, having said that, the distance really between the caste matters a lot. No case of higher, so-called higher to so-called lower. No case. More or less similar. Brahmin, Khatri, whatever, Baniya, however. Interestingly, community is given a lot more emphasis. And by community, I also mean language. There is a lot more resistance to marry people who are from a different linguistic space. So north, south. Whereas if you are Punjabi, UP, it can still happen because they don't consider that the language divide to be so
rigid.
Sorry?
Rigid or strong.
Yeah, exactly. So the negotiation, I'd like to say through what they consider is the value of being middle class, which is education and certain way, style of life. Is that?
Varun, who had the upper hand in deciding marriage, boys or girls? Boys.
I mean, there's a talk that I did, and Sonal here had attended it last year. It's interesting, sad to see that women are disciplined as much as they will be disciplined if they're educated or if they're not educated. Negotiations really, actually, also adding to what you asked, negotiations really also center around whether the bride will wear a sari if she's not from a Marwadi family and she's marrying into a Marwadi family. So the onus really comes on her. Will you agree to stay with my mother? Will you agree to cook from time to time? Will you agree to participate in puja from time to time? Will you agree to wear a sari? Interestingly, none of these questions I ever posed to the men. Will you agree to help me in household chores? No. And I don't think the onus lies here only with the men. It's also the women's responsibility. I mean, if they don't bring these aspects into communication of a relationship, then what do they expect? They're simply reproducing patriarchy. Which is really quite sad. But the gendered dynamics of spouse selection I think are very, very strong, where the age-old tradition of bride givers, bride receivers is there in new forms. I mean, and it is also, by the way, the reason of collapse of all these
So
divorces.
if they are having multiple partners, so women are users.
Sure, if they're users.
One way or the other. I mean,
Why? Because they are not able to decide that they will be married so and so.
no, the
Man
point
has
is
to
when they
decide.
finally go to marry, they still fall
Yeah.
into all the old truths. That's, I think,
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken,
yeah.
the point.
I mean, it's quite.
Women don't really, yeah.
Regardless of whether you are single or
Multiple partners, that's irrelevant.
Yeah,
when you
same
finally
type.
marry,
Yes,
you
correct.
still wear a sari or whatever.
When everyone, when the respondents are, they're talking about the PDAs in Lodi Gardens, is privacy ever the issue of not respecting their privacy, or that they are not indulging in these activities in a public space because they respect the privacy? Was that ever brought up?
Not such a nuanced way. It's pretty crass that
We are middle class, we don't do it. We are decent people. But I get what you're saying, but they haven't invoked it in their responses to me.
Because my question is coming from the fact that a lot of people will put up a lot of stuff on their social media.
sure.
And that's depending, I'm obviously
Absolutely
doesn't matter
right.
which class they're coming from, but they put up a lot of stuff, like you're saying, they'll write checked in Mustafa. So privacy is not really much of
Yeah.
Sorry, would it be possible that for Delhi people,
Yeah.
the city is not the city is not Simul City. So Simul City is only for the people that come from outside, but for the Delhi people, because those elites function in spaces that are very homogeneous,
Yeah.
for them, Delhi is understood as a small town. I mean, everybody knows everybody. They all went to the same school. So would that be possible?
Absolutely. I mean,
From
I
research?
strongly do believe.
I mean, I do believe in this, that the middle class have ways of finding their own city within this city, and which they have by occupying these spaces. So yeah, and in fact, that's what I said, right? I mean, one of the things that I said, that they are laying a claim to being this particular kind of middle class by excluding certain others. So if you start occupying spaces where you don't see the Lodi Garden non-middle class, or however they want to define them, I mean, you've secluded yourself in a city. You've made a city for yourself. In fact, interestingly, again over lunch we were talking about the malls that are in Vasant Kunj, and both my research projects have made me go to these malls, and I've seen that the 3 malls in Vasant Kunj cater to very different crowds of Delhi, and they all understand that. It hasn't to be. It shouldn't be etched on the doors. They understand it. They understand which class person should be seen in which mall. They get it. So in that way, the city becomes many cities for many classes. Yeah.
Really? I never realized that.
How many?
Yeah. Because they say that that ambience mall is for common people.
Absolutely.
and then
Promenade is for middle
Promenade
class,
is
and
for,
Emporio is for elites.
Okay, I went wherever the product I wanted to buy was available.
You bought products very easily from Emporio malls.
I don't know.
Sorry, I just want to know, I'm curious.
That's a thing. So
I
part of
collect
it,
a lot
there
of
are
these.
no
Anyway, sorry.
other questions. I was just curious about one thing selected this article. And as you said, these are what you would find in called high-end athletes, high achiever
Right.
groups. And what you do find in your findings also relate to this nexus between capital and so I'm just wondering, is it possible that somehow this particular group that you've selected is a group that sort of associates an element of its self-worth, relative of its definition, with access to capital, if not actually sort of the kind of consumption. And therefore, in some sense, as you said, the need to signal to the others that you have access to the capital, especially you're saying the part of this spouse selection story, why I asked spouse selection is one story, but is it the case that this kind of behavior is more accentuated when you're getting into spouse selection, where in being intra-class is more important? So one, the first question is, to what extent could it be that your results reflect a certain subset of the middle classes, high achieving, sort of people who are focused on certain monetary goals? And two, does this kind of behavior and sort of association of capital and romance, would it differ between romance and spouse selection, or in some sense between, if what you're saying is people start getting serious when they're 27, sort of before when they're in the younger romances and your ages?
I think no, I think this is really good to ask this, because it does not differ between romance and spouse selection, and one of the chapters in my thesis is on matrimonial websites and matrimonial agencies, and the chapter is monetization of spouse selection. It's shocking, really, to see that the first questions that these matrimonial agents ask when they go to these go for house visits, or when people come, is the income and how much they're willing to spend on the wedding. And it's also interesting to see so many of my respondents would paint their houses before the spouse selection process even begins. I'm not talking about the wedding. And buy more expensive cars, invest in these aspects, precisely for the process of spouse selection, not simply to romance. So I'm not sure. I don't think in my work, in my sample, it did not differ. In fact, if anything else, it probably was more accentuated in the spouse selection process rather than romance, because spouse selection was supposed to be more serious, and therefore more permanent markers of your status had to be etched. And I absolutely agree with you that is it simply consumption or access to capital? And I absolutely agree that the primary motivation is definitely to demonstrate an access to capital and show yourself as having high sort of monetary goals. Your actual consumption practices might actually differ in due course. So, for example, many of them emphasize that upon marriage, their goals was within 4 or 5 years to have a house and to save up for their children. So I'm guessing that would also require, because a lot of times they would say, this is the time where we can do this. Later on, we wouldn't. So I think there was also that certain element of leisure and age group where you can flaunt the capital and not just have access but flaunt it. But then later on, you go back to the middle class value of saving up. And then we save up. We save up for our kids. We save up for different things, which is in stark contrast to the elites who don't have the concept of saving up except in Swiss bank accounts. So.
May I add something on the same? You could also look at Asian cities, for example, Beijing or Seoul, Tokyo. They also may have gone through similar transformations.
I just don't have the funding.
No.
And learning the language.
Yeah, I'll hire a
Do you have a chapter on arranged marriages also?
Yeah, I do. I challenge the idea of arranged marriages, and I'm not sure what really arrangement is, because I think
The book needs to be out really quickly. As you can see, there is a great amount of efficiency.
I don't know how many. That's true. Okay, next year. By next year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And hope to see you next month. You should have been able to.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. My name is Sophia Rika. I'm a German journalist, but I actually have